Bruce, we're joined by someone this morning whose name lends itself to a truly iconic British brand. So I don't know about you, but when I was a lad in London, I grew up with Rossi's ice cream, right? I saw vans all over the place. And the man who's joining us this morning, his family started all that. Francis Rossi, welcome to Psycho Schizo Espresso. How are you?
Buongiorno, bella, come stai? Sono professore or dottore medico or accademico? Quale? You have to tell me. Oh, sorry, I slipped. Should we start again?
I got professori there. How are things in the world of ice cream these days then?
I was supposed to go into ice cream, but at the time that was a horrendous thought, and now I'm thinking it would have been that bad. Well, maybe it would. I don't know. It's got quite violent, I believe.
Turf wars.
I wanted to
Is it ice cream wars?
Oh, yeah, all of that goes on. And then, a couple of times my dad came home beaten up for some reason, unless he was chasing someone's wife. He was probably a bit that way.
Didn't you cut your
Italiano.
Didn't you cut your hand serving ice cream once as well?
I told you that story in complete.
Yeah,
these chambers. They see the ice cream goes into chambers. It's sort of liquefied. You pour it in the top, and it's a frozen chamber. This thing spins around with blades, and it makes ice cream. Well, I stood up to check it. He said, "Check it," and I pushed the ice cream down in a little funnel piece like that. And of course, the blade kicks in to start the thing, and it chopped my finger, and it kind of went pink. The ice cream, and. Fuck knows whether they get away with that these days, but he made me serve it the rest of the day. He said, just tell him it's strawberry or something. You had strawberry in the car. So shouldn't tell that story, should we, really?
There's probably all those people of a certain generation running around South London with things wrong with them, right? Yeah. And they're all trying to find out the reason. It's going to be traced back to this kind of dodgy ice cream van.
Yes, it's
Rossi
DNA.
Yeah, I can see that. But we were stronger in those days, weren't we, darlings? Everybody was stronger back then. You see the fog, the smoke, the shit in your nose. And the
Don't go there, Bruce, with the Rossi DNA. So just in case people don't know, we're talking to, of course, it is Francis Rossi, founder and frontman of Status Quo. Now, I've been looking at a few of the stats here, Francis, and they're amazing. So, 22 top 10 hit singles over the years, UK charts, 57 top 40, 7.5 years in the singles charts. And of course, you opened Live Aid in 1985, just a small matter there. I mean, where did it all start? I mean, you look at it now and you think, how the hell would you get to that kind of stage? I mean, where did it start?
Well, interestingly, you said found a member, and Bruce and I know about this. Suddenly, everyone's a buddy found a member. I met Alan Lancaster and a guy called Alan Key in school, in secondary school. I was about 12, and I can't think why, but I started to learn to play trumpet. And the three of us were in this. Alan Lancaster played trombone, and Alan Key played trumpet. And I think Alan Key said, let's make a group, a beat group. Well, pop wasn't pop group then, it was beat group. So it's weird because I've seen places somewhere where Alan now says he recruited me. So one would have to have a band to recruit the rest. But it's one of those things, everyone seems to be founder members or founder something. It's, I suppose it's good, but I don't know. I've just been extremely lucky to have lived this long so that I can get the neck.
So that was, when was that? Back in 62, something like that?
1962. Yeah, we actually did our first gig at the sort of October 62-ish. And but that was with John Coughlin by then, myself and Alan Lancaster, and a guy called Jess Jaworski, who was the keyboard player. So they were all kind of founder members. We were just there at the time, you know. How any one of us could have been a founder, but you're all mates, aren't you?
Yeah, that's interesting because although I'm not a founder member of Iron Maiden. In fact, I was actually headhunted. I was watching a program with what was it? One of these Sky Arts type things the other night. It was about the making of Machine Head by Deep Purple. A big discussion about Purple, about how the fact that they were all put together as they're basically session musicians, and they kind of selected who they wanted, and it all got same with Led Zeppelin as well. They weren't like mates to begin with.
No, I think that's true with Zeppelin, but I'm pretty sure that's not true with Purple, because I remember working with Purple when they were episode 6, and Gillan and Roger Glover were together at that point.
Yeah, Gillan and Glover were always together. But
with respect, you're the man I see when, and I know I don't really, other than this morning, know lots of history of Iron Maiden, but without getting, up your name, you're the bloke that I see, or I know as being a floating punter, as it were. I don't remember anybody else or know anybody else. So that's show business, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was always conscious that I was in this band, and the bass player who actually started the band. So Steve, if it's anybody's band, it's his, because he started it, and it's always been. Yeah. He started it, and he's fired everybody over the years.
I think the clues are there. The clues are there. The fired everybody's the clue.
The only guy who didn't fire was me, because I quit. So I mean, and then I came back. So I'm the only one that's ever quit and come back. But,
do you know what, Bruce? I saw that show, the one you're talking about. I saw it the other night. The Making of Machine Head, the documentary. Richie Blackmore was on it.
Yeah,
and it was really interesting because I was watching it. And it seemed that over the years, Richie Blackmore had fallen out with nearly everybody, and he'd fallen out with Ian Gillan, like countless numbers of times. And it was really funny. I heard a funny story about Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, obviously of Cream, and who famously didn't get on. And when back in 2014, when Jack Bruce was dying, he picked up the phone to say goodbye to all of his mates. And he picked up the phone to Ginger Baker. And he said, "Hello, Ginger, it's Jack, I'm dying, fuck you." And he put the phone down. And the story goes that Ginger Baker tried to ring him back frantically on a number of occasions, but Jack Bruce says the problem with Ginger was he always wanted the last word. Well, he didn't fucking get it this time. And then, of course, he croaked. Now, it's really interesting. When I saw the show the other night, and he had Ian Gillan and Richie Blackmore constantly falling out, one of the things which I'm really interested in as a psychologist, and it's interesting talking to France about how Quo started and went through the years. I mean, it's interesting to explore. I mean, do you actually need to get on with other members of the band in order to produce good music? Does it help if there's a bit of friction? I mean, I don't know. What do you guys reckon?
I think there's a two-way thing there. There are definitely bands who didn't get on that made great music, or whether it's great or not, it's become very, very popular music. And there are definitely bands that got on that made popular, but inevitably we grow up, which is what happened with Status Quo. You get older, you earn money, you become famous, like hopefully, and all those things contribute to the negatives coming up in the band.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on it, Francis, is that it effectively, if the music's great at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. I don't think people. It's almost trivia. It's like that reality TV stuff that people want to poke around and say, what did they all have for breakfast? And they disagreed, and one guy was vegetarian, the other guy wasn't.
I always like an analogy to you go into a restaurant, right? And I was in a very posh restaurant a few years ago, and we had a table right near the kitchen, and we heard the most unholy row coming out of the kitchen. I mean, they were effing and blinding. It was all kinds of stuff going on in the kitchen. You'd have think, right, this place, police are going to be called in a minute. It's going to be a murder in there, right? But the food that was coming out was absolutely bloody, double Michelin-starred grub. So, in a sense, I suppose what you're saying, Bruce, is, it doesn't matter what's going on in the kitchen. Actually, if what's coming out and is being served up to the punters is good, then actually kind of the music is like the proof in the pudding, I suppose, really.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I think is do your heroes have to be likable? Because I mean
that's interesting.
Because a guy can make you cry with the most amazing guitar playing and be an absolute arsehole.
Francis pointing himself there.
I can make you cry with my guitar playing, all right? Don't you worry about it, son.
There's a very funny story about, you might know it, about Charlie Watts and Mick Jagger. It was back in the 80s. You're talking about punching someone, France. Back in the 80s, I think it was in Holland somewhere, and they'd just done a big gig, and they were pissed up in a hotel. 3 a.m, Charlie had gone to bed, And Mick's down in the lobby with the rest of them. He's picked up the phone to Charlie, and phone's rung in Charlie's room about, as I say, 3 a.m. And Mick's on there slurring his words, and he goes, "Where's my fucking drummer?" And he puts the phone down. Anyway, nothing happens for about 15 minutes. So Charlie gets up, has a shave, puts on a 3-piece pinstripe suit. Immaculately dressed. Puts on his George Cleverly bros, clicks down the stairs, walks into the lobby, chins Mick, knocks him down on the ground, right? Mick's coming round all groggy. And Charlie Watts, as he's clicking back off to his room, says, "Don't you ever talk to me like that again. I'm not your fucking drummer, you're my fucking singer." And then that was the end of that story. So, I mean, it's the tensions behind what you see. I suppose it's inevitable. You know, you see it in football teams, you see it in any kind of team, really. Yeah, I was talking about Kitchens a minute ago. Any kind of team, you're going to get friction, you're going to get ego, I suppose. You're going to get all kinds of things. So
definitely ego. But Bruce and I are similar in as much as if it gets to that physical thing, can't deal with that.
Yeah.
That's one thing, whatever happened in Status Quo, there was never any, people, with Rick and I, we got on very, very well, and as time went by, it wasn't so well, but there was never any. I think once we threw a towel at each other in Munich. I remember throwing a towel at him, and then we laughed like hell after the effect that you stop, I'll hit you in a minute. You know, it was a bit that way. And
now we had a few moments actually. I mean, I think it with my setup joining a band that had already done 2 albums and already famous and already headlining sort of Reading Festival and all the rest of it, or not almost headlining Reading Festival. So it was a big step up for me to go in there. But I went in there with a sort of very bolshy attitude that I was going to change things around, which didn't initially. I mean, me and Steve, we butted heads on the big tour we did, Number of the Beast, biggest album, huge, blah, 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 number 1, everything. And we actually were going to go outside, roll our sleeves up and set to each other after Newcastle City Hall. Well, that's what happens when you go to Newcastle, isn't it?
Yeah.
that's part of the action, it Bruce up there.
But literally, our manager had to sort of like separate us and say, "No, he's staying." Because
really?
But we were quite prepared to go at it, and adventure of that. I think we grew into this, or we have grown into this thing over the years, where we've grown into being friends, all of us in the band. Because I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody from the East End. I went to the East End to go to university, but I lived on the Isle of Dogs, so I knew where West Ham was, and Stepney Green and Bethnal Green and all the rest of it. But we grew in, and when we hired Nico, for example, who Clive Burr, Steve got pissed off and said, "Look, he's not cutting the mustard," and he had to go. And we brought in Nico, and Nico was a straight down the line session guy, form as long as your arm on all the people that he'd played with, and Gordon Giltrap, Heart Song, So one day he's doing his little drum rolling things that he does, I went, that just sounds like the beginning of that song, Heart Song by Gordon Giltrap. He goes, "Oh, I fucking played on that, didn't I?" So it was just, because he was a session player from when he was like 16 years old, because he was such a great drummer. And then hiring somebody like Nick. But Nick, I can't imagine Iron Maiden now without Nick. He's like our mascot, he's as visible as our Monster Eddie, It's amazing. So we're hoping you are enjoying our little chat on Psycho Schizo Espresso, but don't forget, we do have a special thing for you. If you want to pay £4 a month, you can become a Patreon, which means you get the unedited content, you get the extra long episodes, and we're even going to come up with some special stuff for you. You can become a Patreon if you want at www.patreon.com/Psycho Schizo Espresso. And now, back to the music.
I'll tell you what, I've had a look. Interestingly enough, I was on the old web this morning. I had a look at like metal, what we talk about when we talk about heavy metal, and I didn't know this. Now I've had a look at it, and there are loads and loads of different kinds of metal. I'll just read a few out here. You've got heavy metal, speed metal, thrash metal, power metal, death metal, black metal, pagan, folk, gothic, glam metal, doom metal, groove, industrial, and neoclassical metal. Now,
to name but a few.
Now, if I was to listen to any of those, I don't think I could probably tell the difference between one or the other. I'm sure really die-hard fans would be able to. But as a band, so Francis, you're in what I guess you would call a hard rock, heavy rock band, Status Quo.
I don't know. I've always seen as a pop rock country blues band, a bit of everything.
I'd agree with that. No, Francis, I'd absolutely agree with that. It's exactly what Status Quo are.
It seems to me that what's happened these days is music has got more black and white. There's more categories of music now, and it seems to be more pronounced. And I've kind of argued this in various points before, that I think we live in an age of identity where we use things like music, we use things, dare I say it, like our gender, and other kinds of preferences as almost like a way of tapping in and projecting our identity. I think we live in an age of identity now. I'm just wondering whether you guys think that maybe with music this has become more pronounced with things like Spotify. So you've now got all these different genres and like Spotify kind of magnifies it.
Don't you think everything in our lives is suffering by the amount of choice? And the more of those categories where they split up various heavy metal into various things, or blues into various things, or jazz into various things, more and more and more and more choice. And to me, there seems to be less and less satisfaction with anything.
Well, it's interesting.
Perhaps that's
yeah. Well, there's
Yeah.
lots of studies that show that, Franz. There's something in psychology called, you'd be interested in, it's called the paradox of choice. And actually it shows that we all think that choice is a good thing, and it is up to a certain level. But if you get too much choice, it actually becomes detrimental. And there was a wonderful study which was conducted a few years ago, I think it was in America, where you had a load of people and they were presented with two different market stalls of jam. So one group of people had 3 jams to choose from, and another group of people had something like 16 different flavours of jam to choose from. And if they made a choice, if they chose which was their favourite, jam, they'd get something like, I don't know, a few quid off or something like that. And it was really interesting that the people who were given, presented with 16 different varieties of jam were unable to make a choice. They actually couldn't choose which was their favourite flavour, whereas if you would just give people 3 choices of jam, they were far easier to do it. Because the irony is, if you've got 16, you might try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By the time you got to 9 or 10, you can't remember. The brain doesn't have the capacity to remember what 1 and 2 tasted like. And so all of a sudden, you've got all this what we call cognitive load going on. You're kind of all this kind of, well, what did that say? What did that taste like? Oh, I've got to make a decision. In your brain, you shuts down. You just go for the default, I can't decide. Or you just choose one which you don't like. Just to get yourself out of the situation.
It's just the same thing with beers, isn't it?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, but it is. I mean,
I know where you're going.
No. There are bars. I think there's a bar in, I think it was in Saskatoon, right, in Canada, and we go to this bar in Saskatoon, and I kid you not, there were 200 beers on tap. Everyone had a little tap. 200 beers on tap, and you're going. No, and Yannick would go in there, right? Yannick would go in there. They'd say, "Look, Yannick, there's 200 beers on tap," and he'd go, "Well, yeah, I'll have a Carlsberg." That was it. It was happy as Larry. It's like people that drink Guinness.
Yeah, but it's satisfied as well, right? They're satisfied and dissatisfaction with the amount of choice. Because bugger it, I'll have what I like. I like the choice.
Yeah.
I think we feel good making choices.
There was a great episode of The Simpsons a few years ago where they had this massive shopping supermarket called Monstro Mart. I don't know if you saw it, if you remember it. And the mantra was where shopping is a baffling ordeal.
Yeah.
And basically you had the express checkout, and it said something like 500 items or less, right? And you could go through that one. Nutmeg came in like 12-pound barrels, and it was just like, and actually it's exactly what you're saying. If you get too much choice, actually you make worse decisions. That's what the science shows us, and so I think that what Francis is saying totally works. Yeah,
but isn't that the same thing with music? Because if you get a band that is too disparate in their style, because let's face it, Iron Maiden, we could all play country and western. We could all, we could actually, because they're really good. Our guys we're really good musicians. Honestly, we really are. And so they could all go and play in covers bands. They could all do this. Nico could do a bit of reggae. Dave's a big reggae fan and stuff like that. We don't do reggae in Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
So if we suddenly had 8 different styles of music on an Iron Maiden album, we'd go we'd go bonkers. We'd go, what are we doing? And the audience would go, what are they doing? It's not what the audience want. It's not what we want. We've refined this style. And funnily enough, even if we did do I Shot the Sheriff, right, and we all got together and went, oh, let's have a laugh and do I Shot the Sheriff, somebody would come along and say, this is a weird one, Francis, as well. You see if you agree with me on this. Somebody would say, that's Iron Maiden doing I Shot the Sheriff, because it just sounds like Iron Maiden.
That's the whole relevance of all that. When it must have been, maybe it was said to you, or maybe it's said to various acts that, oh, they shouldn't have done that. It's not them. Yeah. Well, there's a contradiction in there, and surely we did it, so it is us. Same with you. If you're singing on it, it becomes the style of music. Well, it sounds like Iron Maiden. He is the voice of Iron Maiden, as much as that may upset people in the band. Sorry, guys. And the same happens in Status Quo, that, oh, they shouldn't have done that. It's not them. Because it fucking is. We just did it.
But what
it's
I mean
a contradiction
is it sounds... you can't stop it sounding like... It's like your voice. And the same thing if the Rolling Stones get together, I mean, I know half of them can hardly play anymore because of, bless him, his fingers are all arthritic and everything.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. As soon as they all stand on the stage together, you're thinking, oh my God, it's the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And there are Rolling Stones cover bands, karaoke bands, everything coming out of your ear holes who can play better than the Rolling Stones, but they're not the Rolling Stones. How does that happen?
And I think the other thing, what you tapped into there, Bruce, and you actually, Francis, is another profound psychological fact, and that is that if there's one thing we know about our brains, it's the fact our brains evolved to love certainty. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like incongruity. We don't like anything that, doesn't pass the cognitive sniff test. And you're exactly what you're right there, Bruce. Iron Maiden playing reggae, you've got a profound incongruity there between Iron Maiden and the identity of it. And then you've got a genre of music which doesn't go. And so fans and people listening will say, well, okay, this doesn't compute. And it goes against that certainty principle. We like things. Our brains conflate the simplicity with information, with how true it is, with how valuable it is. And it's really...
But also, isn't that messing with the person's identity of who he thinks he is? Because he's an Iron Maiden fan, or he's a Status Quo fan, or he's an ABBA fan, which is where you're going back to the ABBA things. What shit everybody off. Nobody particularly liked ABBA's image. I remember being taken the piss out of by Australian crew because I was carrying around an ABBA on a ghetto blaster. And these guys, because they were macho Australians, just couldn't deal with the image of a bloke that it's in Quo with what Quo's image were, plus listening to Ring, Ring, why don't you give me a call? They just couldn't. So that's what I think with the image thing. You mess with whom a person thinks he is. I'm a Maiden fan, so therefore I conform to all these things. I'm a Quo fan, so or whatever it is.
It's called cognitive dissonance, Francis. Exactly right. So we like to be consistent. So we like to behave in a way in which we like to think we believe in. So it's exactly right. If there's a differential between the two, you like Iron Maiden or you like Quo for a reason, because they've got a certain sound.
I'm going to throw this one at you, Kevin, right now. Okay, on that note, because we talked about all this stuff.
Yeah.
You then have the problem of artists like David Bowie.
Yeah.
Who deliberately circumvent their identity, reinvent their identity, and they have legions of fans who love watching that reinvention.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that it's really true that, but it doesn't mean that everybody can come along and do that. Bowie could do it, and perhaps Prince could do it, but Bowie was much more of a change each time than perhaps Prince was. I think Prince, there was this thread going through.
The line there, I think, is there a set? Is there a set, a subset of humanity that has a particular predilection for enjoying the idea of certainty? And is there another subset of humanity that is just genetically predisposed to, I like things to be different?
The answer is yes, Bruce. The answer to that is there is a spectrum when it comes to how much we like certainty, and it's called the cognitive complexity spectrum, all right? So there are certain people who have very little tolerance for nuance and cognitive complexity, and there's other people that are very, very good at tolerating that. And perhaps at some point, actually, we'll give out the questionnaire. There's a nice little questionnaire which can determine where our listeners, might actually fall on that spectrum.
That's fascinating. You know what, Kevin? I think we've touched on something there. I think that would be fascinating.
It's really interesting that people that are very low in cognitive complexity tend to be fundamentalists. They tend to be extremists, so they can't see the nuances of a situation. So it's either black or white. So actually, in terms of music, I'm not sure if anyone's ever looked at that, Bruce. So, I mean, I think actually
interesting study, eh?
That is a very interesting study. But actually, Francis, coming back to, I mean, actually, Quo are an interesting example of this. So over the years, of course, the personnel has changed. So at the moment, it's you've got Andy Bound still there, isn't he? You've got John Edwards, Richie Malone and Leon Cave. And then, of course, the original, you had yourself, you had Andy Bound, you had Rick Parfitt, you had John Coglan and Alan Lancaster. So you could say, I mean, there was a famous episode of Only Fools and Horses a few years ago with Trigger's broom, and it's become like a philosophical paradox now. So Trigger, the road sweeper, said that, I think it was Rodney, I've had the same broom now for 20 years. I've changed the handle and the brushes so many times, but it's still the same broom, right? But so the philosophical conundrum is it the same broom? And believe you me, academics in cognitive psychology have debated this over the years and are still debating it now. On the one hand, it is the same broom, but on the other, it isn't.
That's the same with the band, isn't it? On the face of it, there are some. This is the whole thing about the relativity thing we have, and this left and right all the time in our lives. Yes, no, is that there are people out there going, yeah, Status Quo. I go and see them. They're not even aware who the members are. They just go and see the band. They've heard about the band. They know they would do stuff. And there is people that would just be swearing at this now, and we'll find that they only see the early band. There are still people that will not go to see the Stones because Brian Jones is not there. And people won't go and see Freddie, and yet they, I believe, I go and see Queen. I believe that Queen's gates are far bigger than they used to be, because of the way the musical took off. But so there are some people that go, no, I can't do it, and they just will not do it, and they're only interested in the band that was Rossi, Parfitt, Lancaster, and Coglan, as you say, and perhaps Andrew Bound. There was an issue when Andrew Bound joined, but they didn't want him to be an actual member. And I think, what are we talking about here? What is so wrong with him becoming a member? We started with a keyboard player, but we are, for some reason, all of this frightens the shit out of each one of us as members of the public, and how we identify with the overall thing. So it's right across the board. Some people see the band, no, they're very keen on the band as it is now. Some think, no, there's no such band as there was then. And then there's middle grounders who, yeah, I like this and I like them. You must have that, Bruce, surely.
Yeah, although I think it's with us now, we've effectively had the same lineup for such a long time. I always say that Maiden are a niche band. We're a very big niche band. Our niche is very big.
That's what's the contradiction, isn't it, in itself?
Yeah, and I always say that our fans are like plywood. Every year we grow another layer of fans, and some bands they invent the table, and there goes the table, and then people get fed up and go, I'm going to get a new table, and then that's it. That's just thrown away. But with us, I don't think we lose that many people from each layer of plywood, and so the table gets thicker, and obviously we over the years have gotten bigger, but as we've gotten bigger, you get people that discover the band, they might be sort of 14, 15 years old, and they discover the band from like album number 10 or number 12. And they get into it there, and then they go, hold on a minute, what's this album back here? Hang on, there's 12, 14 albums I can discover here that I've never heard before. And they go back and they go through the history, and they reinvent the whole the whole story.
We definitely get some of that, but not to the degree I think that you guys do. You seem to do, as you say, continually grow. Well, I mean, when we first did Rockin' All Over the World, we lost so many fans at that point, and yet it sold far more records than anything else had done before. The same within the army, and so you're lucky to have maintained it. It's an envious position to be in.
And one of my favourite songs is one of your very early, Pictures of Matchstick Men. I think it's brilliant. That whole little psychedelic thing, it's great.
Yeah, but that was kind of weird, because the amount of people, and I related to this at the time, that people loved the record and then saw us on Top of the Pops and went, oh, fuck, no, image was wrong for some reason. I remember that with Yellow River, Yellow...
Oh, Christie, yeah.
And I remember going to town telling the managers and the agencies, oh, the fantastic record.
I met him.
And then saw it on Top of the Pops and went, oh, no.
Yeah.
The image wasn't right. So even I'm guilty of that myself when I was younger. So, no.
Francis, have you ever had I watched a program the other week on it was on the London Marathon actually, and there's a group of runners. There's a very small group of runners now. London Marathon started in 1981, and there's a small group. I think it's about 10 runners that have run every single London Marathon, and it's getting smaller by the year. And so I'm just wondering, with Quo, have you met fans that can say to you, I have seen you on every single tour that you've done from, like, I don't know, when would it be? The late 60s right up until now. Is there a small group of people that have seen every single one?
Yeah, there's a few of them have done 600 and something shows, and there's one lady that saw us in, just after we'd done Crackerjack, we were doing a double, 2 nights in somewhere near Margate, and she came to see there were 6 people there and a dog, and she was one of the 6 people.
Wow.
Not the dog.
Yeah.
That's a joke. Yeah, you do get those. You must have those, Bruce. They're fanatical, and they can tell you and how many shows they've been, and they're there all the time. And you think, not sure it's great or sad.
Do you remember, I saw you on this tour, do you remember that? I went, no.
Yeah, remember I waved to you?
Did we play there then? Yeah. Oh my God, we probably did. You know what I mean? But that's the thing. Again, it's and there's probably a psychological phenomenon here. It is that by the time you've done 1,000 shows or 1,200 shows or something else like that, it's special, yeah. But you're in it, and then you're out of it and on to the next one.
Yeah.
But for the person that sees you on that night, if 10 years ago, it's the moment of their life that's permanently embedded in their psyche, and you can't snatch that dream away from them by going no, never heard of it. You know what I mean?
That's why I think I find it difficult when people say, "Are you looking forward to such and such a gig?" And I could never say, "Well, no more than this one tonight or this one tomorrow." When it was Glastonbury or those venues, are you looking forward to it? Well, no more than tonight's gig or tomorrow's gig. And I do find that in a problem. Going to the thing about we had choice and expectations about life. We have such expectations how this gig's going to be. And I know that in myself particularly, if I do that, I walk out there and I'm trying to find this rather than let the thing be. And therefore your experience is, my God, that was fantastic. I'd love to do it again. As long as you don't take it with you the following night and try and find, which I notice trying to find in my head the sound or the vibe or whatever it was. So each gig to me is dreadfully important, and then it's gone.
Yeah, it's like people said to me, when we did like some humongous festival or something like Rock in Rio first time, and they said, what's it like walking on stage in front of 30,000 people? I said, I couldn't tell you. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Because I'm too busy playing. I'm too busy I'm juggling. I'm juggling. Okay, what's the sound like? Am I singing like a twat? How's the band? How's everything else? And then suddenly I go, oh, look at all those people waving at me. I wonder what they think about it. But you're so in the moment, and because if you weren't, you wouldn't be able to entertain those 30,000 people because you'd be.
Well, I think, or do one's thing. Yeah, I agree.
Listen, I've got to ask you guys. I know we're running a bit short time, but I've got to ask you guys. While I got you together, so obviously going back to sport, Leicester City won the Premier League, I think, back in 2016, beating the likes of Manchester United, Manchester City, Chelsea, all the stellar.
Fantastic result.
Absolutely fantastic. And they were a team which, they weren't big names in the team. They were teams that were players that had been, some occasions rejected from your bigger sides. And they'd all come together almost, and Claudio Ranieri, I suppose you could say, almost radicalised them into being this like really, really tight unit that went on and obviously lifted the Premiership trophy. And I'm just wondering whether there's some kind of this translates into music. So you often hear, Cream, Ginger Baker, Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce. You've got these ideas of super groups coming together. What makes a great group? Is it simply a question of the sum of its musical parts and musical talent, or is it possible that you get a group of musicians that just maybe aren't as technically brilliant, but actually just come together in a band that, as you were saying, Bruce, just hums? So is there a kind of a formula for what makes a great group? Is it about chemistry, or is it about talent, or is it a bit of both? What do you think?
It's a bit of everything, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it because it's not very precise, and I can't give you a straight black and white answer, but there is no black and white answer, because you got groups like the Beatles who musically were a bit all over the place. Yeah. I mean, John Lennon was not the world's greatest guitar player. Paul McCartney was, if you like, the most accomplished muso in the band. And everybody used to take the mickey out of, Ringo, who actually was a fantastic drummer. Yeah. But because he wasn't like flashy, and he made an art of being not flashy. Yeah. With the Beatles, but they used their strengths and their weaknesses together as a team. They did that, and then you throw in the producer George Martin, who all the bits that they didn't know, he knew. Yeah. So when they had
but they had excellent songs. Remember, they had some serious songs, pop tunes or whatever.
They did have some. They did have some great tunes, but he enabled the vision to be so much bigger. Yeah. Than just being Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Yeah. I think there was a great quote from John Lennon, wasn't there, when he was famously asked once whether Ringo Starr was the best drummer in the world, and he said he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles. Yeah, which was like a bit harsh. But what do you reckon, Francis? Do you think is it chemistry, or is it talent, or what?
It's all of those things, because one act is going to be down to its sheer musicianship, one act is going to be down to its songwriting. ABBA's was the songwriting, and there was no musicianship particularly between the two guys or the girls, but something went on there, part of the image went on there, which is why you end up going back to X Factor all the time. They're trying to pretend that we're going to go and find that. And I always noticed whenever I'd see the odd one, and you'd see some guy, oh, he's good, I like him. And then if they did get to win, even my thing changes. Well, now you're competition. Now you're going to go and feed from the same trough as the rest of us. And I find that takes part of it too. And it's all the things that we've been talking about since we've been on.
When's the next Quo tour, Francis?
We go out in February, I believe. February the 27th. We start in Belfast next year.
Right. And now, are you looking forward to it, or you're looking forward to getting out there, or is it kind of too far away yet?
If I say I look forward to it, I'm contradicting everything I said. Well, yeah, kind of. I look forward to seeing the guys and getting into the stride of it all again. But I think a certain amount of me's got locked down lazy, and we owe this tour and the current talk tour. I think we're past that now. We owe that from last year, and it's kind of, I find that's the weirdest thing. And it's just the longest I haven't worked since September 2019. So last time I did a show, and I've never been off this long before. So it's all a bit weird and all a bit uncharted. So whatever it brings, and I just hope I do enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, the best of luck with it. It's been great talking to you, really.
You're going to fuck me off now, are you? If that's fair enough.
I've been trying to do that for the last half hour.
Have you, love?
No, it's been great talking to you, Francis. It really has. Really, really enlightening.
Thank you
Some
very
of
much.
that stuff. Really, really.
I like a man that can lie. It's obviously part of your gig, right?
Well, I'm looking straight into the camera when I say that. I'm not looking shifty like that. But no, I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We really have been looking forward to talking to you. Hello, folks. We hope you're enjoying Psycho Schizo Espresso. Just to remind you, it's a Pod Prod production, so please feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcast. You can also reach out to us on email at pse@podprod.co.uk and follow us on social media on the hashtag Psycho Schizo Espresso. You can also, of course, become a Patreon by clicking on www.patreon.com/Psycho Schizo Espresso, where you can gain exclusive access to unedited and unfiltered content if your brain can possibly handle any more of me and Bruce.